want to do. We talk about this, and we talk about certainly these fears as the pandemic rages on. And now we are going to be reaching out to somebody who's dealing with the coronavirus directly, somebody who's been infected with it for 39 days now under quarantine. And he comes to us from Nebraska, his quarantined home for the last few weeks. And after contracting the virus back in January aboard the cruise line of his choice with his wife at that time, he's the owner of the KHTS radio station, hometown station in Santa Clarita, California. Carl Goldman joins us now. Carl, thank you so much for being a part of the live broadcast.
Guys, glad to be there. I know you are happier that I'm here and not in the studio with you.
Well, that's for sure. And Carl, tell us how this all began. I mean, you're somebody that was just much like many of the people in our audience, enjoying themselves on a cruise. A lot of our audience, they're big fans of like the Disney cruise line, but you were on a different cruise line and you came across some pretty unique symptoms, right?
Yeah, and it could have happened on any line. We, of course, love the Disney line and took that many times with our kids. But now that they're grown up, we've moved over to the Diamond Princess, taking a trip through Southeast Asia. So we left Santa Clarita, California, where we own the radio station and our website, hometownstation.com, on January 17th. Went to Tokyo and then boarded the Diamond Princess over in Yokohama on January 20th. Enjoyed 15 days of a 16-day cruise. And on the last day, a passenger had exited the cruise line in Hong Kong 4 days later came down with the virus. The captain announced this on the PA, told us all that we were going to be delayed one extra day, even though our suitcases were already packed. And he was going to double his speed back to Yokohama, which was our point of departure. When we got to Yokohama the night prior to us leaving, the Japanese health officials came on board. They decided they were going to visit with every single passenger and crew. That was over 3,500 of us, taking our temperature, getting a history of where we traveled, and doing some kind of assessments on us. No, they were not doing the corona test on us at that time. They were just assessing us and looking for fever, because the fever seems to hit about 99% of the people getting it. The next morning, we woke up, and that first day of quarantine, we had full use of the ship. We were eating in the dining room, walking around the ship, doing everything we would just as a bonus day on our cruise. The next morning, we woke up, and it was announced that 10 people looked like they had fever. 10 people had fevers, looked like they were going to be quarantined and sent to a hospital in Tokyo, and we were to remain in our cabins quarantined for 14 days. So I got to spend Valentine's Day in my cabin with my wife, at least, and we ended up with 12 of the 14 days quarantined in the cabin until the State Department chose to take the Americans off the ship and fly us back home to the States.
Absolutely incredible,
about
Carl.
360 Americans on board at the time.
And since then, obviously, you've been separated from your wife as you've been quarantined there in Nebraska. What does your life look like day to day? What do you do there?
Yeah, I managed to keep busy. So just to finish the story, I woke up on the plane 2 hours into our flight with a very high fever of 103. They put me in a quarantine area there, flew us to California. Most of the passengers exited the plane in California except for 3 of us and our spouses, and we were sent on here to Omaha. Here in Omaha, they have a biocontainment unit that was set up right after the anthrax scare, right after 9/11. They never used it for anthrax, but then when the Ebola crisis hit, they put some patients there, and then I was patient number 2. And that's a scene like out of a movie, because no one entered my room without wearing hazmat suits. I was totally sealed off. 2 cameras were on me at all times, and they were looking at me, monitoring me, and I could communicate back and forth on the 2-way cameras and scream to Central Command down the hall. My day, though, is, and what's weird is my wife never got the virus. The whole time but we were quarantined on the ship, she didn't get it. She's now back in Santa Clarita working at the radio station and heading home because she's kind of treated like a leper returning from a colony, even though she never had the virus. So I kid, when I get back, I'm going to have a big C tattooed on my forehead and be like the guy in the Monty Python movie with the monk swinging incense and ringing a bell saying, make way for the plague, make way for the plague.
Well, joining us here in studio for today's episode and for this discussion, Tyler Crouch. Katrina is out today, but Tyler, you being here with us and you hearing this sort of story, what sort of questions do you have for Carl? What comes to mind?
Well, my number one question is, when things were at its worst with your symptoms, what were you feeling? What were the bad things that were happening to you?
Yeah, so unlike, first of all, physically, this thing hit with that high fever, so feeling great, and then waking up 2 hours later with a high fever. Unlike other colds or the flu or high fevers that I've had, there was no sneezing, no sniffling, no headache, no sore throat, just a dry cough developed. Usually when I get a cold, it moves to my chest and becomes a cough with a lot of phlegm. There was very little of that. Even with that high of fever, normally I would have chills mixed in with a lot of sweating, that hot cold. That never happened. Just a lot of fatigue. The fever lasted about 8 hours for the remainder of the flight over to Sacramento. And that was it. Other than the dry cough, a little bit, if I walked around the room after a day or two and was also talking on the phone at the same time, I'd have a little shortness of breath. But if I wasn't contagious, I would have been at work 48 hours after the virus first hit me.
Sure. Wow. So go ahead, Wade.
I was just going to mention that, obviously there's a lot of chaos happening out there right now in terms of how people are reacting to this, Carl, and a lot of folks dealing with this in different ways, but the most of which seems to be panic across the country. You may have heard, it seems that, stores are running low on basic supplies, things like toilet paper, of all things, but things like toilet paper, things like your bread, your eggs, your milk, that sort of thing. And lines even this morning here in Southern California have, stretched outside of many grocery stores and of many places where you can, purchase your essentials. What do you make of that? I mean, obviously you're living with the virus right now. You sound healthy. You seem healthy. We understand that you tested positive once again last night, unfortunately, for coronavirus. But you seem in remarkably good spirits, and you look and sound good.
Yeah, and I'm making lemonade out of lemons. I learned early on. I guess there's two stages and two answers to your question. One is, what about before you get the virus and the panic that's taking place all over the country right now? And then two is, what happens if you get the virus or exposed and have to go into quarantine? Those really are two totally separate mindsets.
Sure.
But to answer the first part of that, people just need to be a lot more calm than they are. They need to stay smart and follow the guidelines with the CDC. There's some good tips there about washing hands, not touching your face, staying away from crowds. You've already talked about that. I've learned that the thermometer is the best friend for anyone because 99% of the cases with corona seem to have that quick spike of fever. And particularly in Southern California, where spring is right around the corner, and that means allergies for a lot of people. But there's going to be a lot of sneezing, sniffling, coughing, sore throats from the allergies. Don't freak out with that. Grab the thermometer, and if you don't have a fever, the odds are really, really good that you do not have the virus. So that's one recommendation. I've also learned that the virus doesn't seem to like warm environments, and that's why we're hoping as the spring and summer hit, particularly in Southern California, but all over the country, that the virus will start subsiding and the spreading of the virus will subside because they don't like to live in warm environments. So I've been drinking a ton of tea, doing a lot of ginger as well because that brings the body heat up, and walking around my room, getting exercises. In my norm, I would always do 10,000 steps minimum a day. So I made it a goal here to do those same 10,000 steps. And it's a little difficult because there's only 14 steps till I hit the wall. So you can do the math on how many pacings I had to have to do.
I know a lot of people are worried about, our elders and everybody who's older. And I was just curious if you wouldn't mind sharing your age and if you think that you were in any sort of real threat of something horrible happening to you.
Yeah, I have two things going. First of all, I'm 67 years old. And second of all, I came down in mid-November with Guillain-Barré syndrome, which is a syndrome that affects the immune system, hits the nervous system and the hands and feet. So I was struggling with that and still am struggling with that. So the doctors felt on the plane, because I fit the description of high risk, they were going to put me in the biocontainment area. I had our friend who was traveling with us, she had come down with the virus 2 days earlier. And you asked me how I felt. When she got the virus, it really hit us. She was given 1 hour to leave the ship. She was separated from her husband, Mark, and she had to go to a hospital 4 hours away in Fukushima, Japan. That's where the nuclear disaster hit, with only her Google translator as a way to communicate. So when she got, by the time she got to the hospital, her high fever that hit her had dissipated. She had no other symptoms. So even though we were devastated that she had it and very, very scared until about 18 hours later when we realized she was fine, and we had already seen some 300 passengers go off the ship as well, and they were also very fine, and more reports were coming that 97% of the people who get this get a mild version like I had. Unfortunately, yes, 3% or 3.4%, I think is the latest number, are dying from this, and particularly the elderly and those with pre-existing conditions. We've already had 7 deaths from our folks on the Diamond Princess. That's tragic, but I really felt that I was going to be okay because I was following the same path as Jerry Jorgensen, and other than the Guillain-Barré, I was in really, really good health.
Well, that's great to hear. And Carl, we were talking before we went live just a little bit about, whether or not you would potentially go on another cruise at some point this year. Say you were cleared of the coronavirus and, you're back in action, which we absolutely, believe that you will be. But, imagine you go back to, a normal sense of life. You go back to running a radio station. And we said, would you ever go on another cruise, especially in this calendar year? Tell us what you said.
Yeah, and I said, and I've said this I've been writing a daily journal on hometownstation.com, and I've shared this a number of times on the journal that I would definitely absolutely go on another cruise. My wife and I love cruising. I would do it in 2020, maybe not next week, but I think in the third or fourth quarter of this year, you'll see me taking another cruise.
How about that? And many of our audience members, they're huge fans of the Disney Cruise Line, and Disney Cruise Line shutting down operations, canceling the rest of their March itineraries, and ensuring that everybody remains safe and that they sort of disperse crowds as much as possible, get rid of any sort of containment vessels, if you will, and doing their part to make sure that folks, keep that social distancing, as it is being referred to. But it's nice to hear that somebody who is dealing with this really shares that they would absolutely go on another cruise. I think that really helps put things in perspective for us. Carl, is there anything else that you want to share with everybody? There's a lot of panic. There's a lot of fear right now. Anything else that you want to share with people that might be dealing with this hysteria?
Yeah, I would say if you do get quarantined, and also even if you're not quarantined yet, just don't panic. Look at everything from a positive standpoint. For me, I've made lemonade out of lemons. My wife and I have done a great job of trying to stay in the present, not dwell on the past, and certainly not worry about the future, because that's out of our control. This whole thing, both my quarantine, but what we're experiencing throughout the country right now, is out of our control. So there's no sense adding stress to the already existing climate that's out there. Stress, as you know, is probably the worst thing for the immune system that exists. So just stay calm and do the best you can to stay present on what the moment is, and just be smart.
Well, Carl, we can't thank you enough for taking time out of your day to chat with us about the most important topic probably of modern history, and certainly wish you all the best. You can visit Carl's hometownstation.com blog at that web address and check out everything that he's writing day to day, and it's a great way to follow along with his experience and help understand probably to an even greater degree what it's like to have coronavirus and to be under quarantine and to be dealing with this very unfortunate but very real problem right now as this pandemic sweeps the globe and we continue to see cases tick up day to day. Carl, you take care of yourself, and we hope to hear of some negative tests coming up very soon for you.
Thank you, Wade. You take care.
Likewise,
Thanks,
sir.
Carl.